Hey guys, Emily Muchanti here, and I want to thank you for jumping onto my channel and checking out this video. Today, we're going to talk about something super important to reading intervention, and that is the absolute most important starting point, which is universal screening. So before we do that, I want to give you a little update personally. You can see that I am in a new location and we have left our home in California and moved to Boise, Idaho, which we are loving. So if you are in the Boise area, give me a shout out and tell me some wonderful things that teachers do around here. I would love to hear from you. Okay, so coming back into this big topic, universal screening. We are at the beginning of a school year, and we know that, especially because of the pandemic, that the kids are knocking down your intervention doors, right? We didn't know in some cases where the kids were, what they were actually completing, how much learning loss had taken place. And so a really important place that we have to start when looking at intervention is universal screening. Now, if you're not familiar with the term universal screening, let me kind of back up and give you a little information here. Universal screening is a assessment that is used to screen an entire school population. Yes, the entire school population. And the reason this is so important is because we don't want kids to fall through the cracks. When we don't use data to drive our instruction and our interventions, we will miss kids. Universal screening allows for us to kind of cover all of our bases. Even that kid that we think is the rock star, they're so well behaved, they seem like they're paying attention. We need to look to see if there are any skill gaps. So that is the biggest reason that universal screening has to be a part of your reading intervention, and it needs to be in place at the very, very beginning. So let's talk about what universal screening tools can you use, or let's talk about not just what you could use, but what you're looking for in a screening product. I have used Dibbles in the past as a screening tool, and then I later went to Acadience when there was the split there. And I loved Acadience. I think it's a great tool, but these are some things that you are looking for when you are looking for a universal screening tool. You're looking for something that is quick, efficient, has been normed, so that you know those numbers are actually reflecting where your kids are, and that is something that can be delivered by trained paraprofessionals or trained teachers. Those are the really big ones. Now, when do we use our universal screening tools? In my opinion, you need to use your minimum of 3 times a year. Okay, this would be at your right at the beginning of your school year, where you have maybe even the day after school starts, maybe that following Monday, but before we know that any instruction has really taken place with our kids. So we want to make sure that we're getting a baseline. This is probably the most important point in time where you want to use your tool, okay? And so the beginning of the year. The second is in right before winter break. So you're looking at August through September. It'll take you a few weeks to assess. And then again, after Thanksgiving, prior to going out to Christmas break. And then the third time would be at the end of the year. And this is to really see what your instruction did for students across the board, because not only is this very telling for your interventions and a measurement for your interventions, but this is a great tool to kind of check your classroom instruction. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Now, what do you do with the results of a screening tool? So generally speaking, as you know, no assessment is going to be valuable to you unless you do something with the data. So the first thing is you have to know what your analytics are. You have to be able to read your reports and know what those reports are displaying as far as instructional needs, skill deficits, skill superiorities. This is super important. Most screening tools, I mentioned Dibbles and Acadience. I know that Acadience has phenomenal training that goes along with this. This was something that I delivered for my district as well. So there are resources available for you in that respect. Another tool that I've never used, but I have heard highly spoken of, is AimsWeb. So keep that one in mind also. So we need to know what the data is actually saying. Now, that being said, we have to make sure that the people delivering the assessment are trained. This is super important because we have to have testing protocols in place. If there is no universal testing protocol in place, then assessor A and assessor B might be doing something totally different, and your numbers are going to be skewed. In that case, you're not getting valid information. Okay, so very, very important that whoever is doing the assessment is highly trained in what they're doing so that the testing protocols are followed to the letter. Otherwise, your data will be invalid and you won't know if you're actually, seeing what you think you're seeing. So keep that in mind. So that being said, who do we train to do the universal screening? Well, in my experience, I had been blessed with a wonderful team of paraprofessionals. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that my paras are near and dear to my heart. They were an extension of what I could do within my intervention programs. So my best recommendation to you is that you have a team of paras that you will then work with to train, and they will then put this together, help you put this together for the school. I also recommend that you do not have your classroom teachers do your screening. Okay, you cannot control closely enough those protocols that we talked about. So you want to keep this screening time frame, let's say it's a 2 or a 3 week time frame, within your grasp, within your line of sight, so that you know that everything is happening the way it's meant to happen. So paraprofessionals are by far, in my opinion, the best to deliver this assessment, including you as the interventionist or reading specialist. Whoever is in charge needs to be in there as well. So how does this happen? Well, you are going to have to first be trained yourself. Okay, you have to be familiar with whatever tool you decide, and you have to know how to use it and get some experience with it yourself. Once you do this, then you can train your paras. Now, if you and your paras are brand new, you can all start with the same training to begin with. But you do want to have some checks and balances in place to make sure that you, again, are following those protocols. So that's super, super important. I would not recommend bringing parent volunteers in. Anytime we do assessment, there is a level of confidentiality in what we are doing and what results we get with those particular students. And some students, they deserve their privacy as far as what kinds of deficits might be seen, how they react under certain situations. And honestly, it's just not an appropriate place for a parent volunteer. So keep it with employees within your school or your district. Super, super important. So my recommendation is that you create a universal screening calendar. What I always did is I spent the first 3 weeks of school assessing. And remember I said to assess the entire school. I'm not kidding. We were able to assess upwards of 600 students with a team of 4 to 5, myself and 3 or 4 paras, and we would knock it out in 3 weeks. Now, It can be done. We had to do a little bit of comp time for our paras so that they could stay over their contracted duty days so that we could get it done in some cases, but it was so important. And another reason it's important is your teachers need these results, okay? So once you've trained your paras, you've set a testing calendar. And like I said, I recommend at the beginning of the year, 3 weeks. Usually mid-year, we were able to get it done, it seems, in about 2, because we had been under, we had done it before. So 2 to 3 weeks there. And again, 3 weeks at the end of the year, because you're also going to be developing reports and that sort of thing. So what do you do with the results of your universal screening? Well, you need to share your results with your teachers and your administration. This is super important. Some great electronic tools online through these different universal screening tools where you have these beautiful reports. Everything is quantifiable. There is nothing subjective in these numbers, which I love. So we can look at cold, hard numbers. We can look at those numbers of students that are proficient within a certain skill. And we can learn at those that have what level of risk they fall in within a particular skill. And notice I said skill. I did not say reading level. This is important. Guided reading levels, and if you're doing FNP or DRA or any of those, has no place in universal screening, in my opinion. Too much subjectivity. Okay, so lack of control of protocols because you have too many assessors, and because it does not focus on skill specifics. They take a super long time. They are not efficient. They really don't follow the science of reading, which is, I'm a huge proponent of the science of reading and looking at skill deficits rather than reading levels. Okay, so just want to clarify that for you. So you've set your calendar, you've trained your teachers, you've got your data, you are now sharing this information with your teachers. This is really valuable because not only can you decide who is going to be pulled for your intervention, but an intervention, I mean like a walk to intervention. That's a different video. If you want to hear more about that, drop something in the chat, because that is like my jam and we can talk more about that. But the teachers, the classroom teachers, can use this information to help them create their small groups for small group instruction. So it's super valuable, and they will feel a great sense of gratitude for the fact that somebody else took the time to assess their students. And the more that they learn about the data, the more thirsty they get for what it is and how they can help their kids. So I found it just to be a win-win situation. Another reason to have a team, an intervention team, assess is your teacher doesn't lose any classroom instruction time. We don't want our students to miss instruction time for assessment or for intervention. Again, another video. If you want to hear about that one, drop it in the comments. I would appreciate it. Okay, so we've got the data. What do we do with it? Well, remember that when you analyze data, you are looking for patterns within the data. Okay, because we want to group students with like needs in the same group so that we can, again, be efficient with our instructional time. And so you're looking for similarities in the data. Generally speaking, a universal screener is going to measure those 5 big focuses of literacy, which is you're going to look at phonemic awareness, you're going to look at phonics, fluency, comprehension, not so much vocabulary in this. That takes a little bit longer, although I know Acadience is adding a beta version of something that may be coming out eventually. But you want to look at these skills. And then we want to basically have an eagle eye on these skills and see who has a certain range of deficits within each of those areas. And then what we can do is group our students by like need. Now, you and I both know that we cannot just go off of the numbers. We have to consider personalities, we have to consider energy levels, we have to consider the dynamic with the instructor. So it's a very kind of, I don't know, a little bit of a tap dance to figure that out, but you will get really good at it really quickly. And then another thing, a final thing to consider is your group size. Now, there's a lot of research that's been coming out about optimal group sizes. And really, the younger they are, the smaller your group size. In my opinion, if you can keep your kinder groups to 3, perfect. Okay. In first grade, you might go to 4, and your upper graders, you could get up to 5. Never go higher than 5. It's too many. And again, remember that you're basing on need, not on the numbers. So you have to look at that as a way to, sometimes you have to do a little give and take. So I've got these 2 kids that are really struggling in this one particular area of phonemic awareness, and I have to hit them really, really hard. So I'm going to have a group of 2 because that's how important it is. And when I can build them up, I can then move them into a different group, or I can redo that group. Let me say this. Your screening tool is meant to be your starting point and your progress monitoring tool. It's not the only assessment you will do. You are going to, for some of your kids, have to do a deeper look at what they're doing. You might do the PAST, which is a phonics screener. The QPS, the quick phonics screener, is the one I used because I wanted to look more specifically at those phonics patterns. Sometimes your screening could be sufficient to get you started, though, until you can see. But a big full battery of diagnostic assessments is really only needed for your most needy kids. Those kids that they keep, you just can't hit the mark with them, and you're not sure, is this a SPED issue, a learning disability? Those are the ones that are going to need some really deep diagnostic. But generally speaking, for your kids that are just behind, especially because of a pandemic, your screening tool is going to be enough to get you rolling. Okay, so let's talk about then the addition of other programs. When you're deciding who is going to take a spot in your intervention, you need to consider who is also involved in other programs, who is already being seen for speech, who's already being seen for RSP, because all of those kids get screened. Remember? And in some schools, I've seen it done both ways, and I've done it both ways myself. My personal opinion is that your RSP students are getting their usually tier 3 instruction within their RSP pullout. But if they can follow the same schedule as your intervention program, even better, because we don't want kids to miss core instruction. Remember, drop a line in the comment if you want to hear more about that. I can do a whole video on not missing core. But some schools, they might be a super small school. They might want their RSP students in RSP, but then again in a reading intervention. And so it's okay to do either way. It just really depends on how many kids you have from the general universal screening. One final note about universal screening. Let's say, for example, you're testing 500 students. Generally speaking, we will see about 10, maybe 20% of a school population that would benefit from additional intervention services. If you have more than 20% of your kids scoring below benchmark in these areas, you have to look really closely at your tier 1 core instruction. You cannot intervene your way out of a core instruction problem. So if that's the case, if you've got 50% of your school population requiring intervention, we need to get back into tier 1 and talk about some really important instructional practices that your teachers can use in their classroom. One big thing that we did in a situation like that is for our primary, we took our phonemic awareness that we used Heggerty for, and we pushed it into all of our kinders and first grades as a core tier 1 instruction, and it was magical. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I know I've given you a lot to chew on when it comes to universal screening. Again, the whole point is we don't want kids to fall through the cracks. And if you are not assessing every single student at your site, then you are going to miss kids. It's as simple as that. So make sure that you're looking for a good tool. I've given you a couple to think about. We know the difference between a universal screener and more of like a guided reading or a leveled reading assessment. They are not the same. And we want to really take some time with this, roll it out as soon as you can. If you've already started, you can always get ready and roll out that universal screening in December. That's okay to do. I have done that in the past as well. So, all right, drop me a comment. Let me know how it's going at school. You know, how are your interventions going? How are they shaping up? What are you struggling with? What's going really well? Let's have a little shout out. And I hope that you will hit the like and subscribe button so that we can have this conversation more often. All right. Bye for now. Have a great day. Mwah.